Hi everybody, how are we doing? Thanks for joining me once again for another set of Saturday morning stories. I've got 4 stories for you this morning. They're all brand new to my channel. As always, I don't know if the guys have sent them to other channels, but they certainly haven't been read out here before. Before I get into them, just explain the background video. I did shoot it myself. I actually shot the background video on what they call the Green Mile. It runs between Benjamin Park and Lumpini Park. And eventually, you'll see in the video, I do end up in Lumpini Park. But it's a great place for a walk. You can actually, we're in the middle of the city, but you can see many of the older style buildings from this walkway. Definitely a recommended walk if you're in this part of town around Sukhumvit near Nana. Okay, so not wanting to waste any time, let's jump into the first of 4 stories today.
สวัสดีค่ะ
I have been married to my Filipino wife now since 2001, and we're both happy living here in Australia. My wife speaks perfect English. In fact, she says she speaks better English than me. My wife has a master's degree and studied on a scholarship at Sydney University. So yes, she is the brains in the relationship, and she reminds me of this on most days. Anyway, it was a couple of years ago she wanted to go back to the Philippines as she had sold some land and needed to go and sign the papers in front of the buyer and the solicitor. Don't get me wrong, we have been to the Philippines many times, staying in nice hotels in Manila and resorts at some of the beautiful beaches in the northern part of the islands. I quite like it actually. It's a fun place. Even the seedy areas in Manila are fun, but obviously I only look and don't touch, if you know what I mean. Okay, so this time she wanted us to stay with some of her cousins in their home about 40 kilometers drive from Manila Airport, as they had a car and could drive us to the appointments. So we arrived at Manila Airport after our flight from Sydney about 8 hours. Her 2 cousins were there to pick us up and drive us to their place about 2 hours due to the heavy traffic. It seemed like forever in a small car with no air conditioning. Luckily, it was evening as it wasn't too hot. Eventually, we arrived at their home in a small suburban area amongst other modest houses. To me, they looked like they were homemade. We walked into the small 2-bedroom house, which was like a fortress with gates, etc. We went into the main living area and there was a large karaoke machine and what looked like 2 park benches with no cushions and a wooden table with lots of old photos on the wall, which I think were their family over the last 100 years or so. It was like a furnace in this small house, so I said, "Is it okay to have a quick shower to freshen up?" The cousins started to laugh. I said, "What, no shower?" They said, "Yes, no shower." So I asked, "How do you shower?" They showed me into this small cubicle which had a toilet and 1 tap about a foot above the floor, which there was a bucket and a cup in it. So what I was supposed to do was fill the bucket, then pour the water over me. I said, "Why is there only 1 tap? Where is the hot tap?" You guessed it, no hot water. Oh, and also the toilet didn't flush, so you had to use the bucket to flush down your business in the toilet. I ended up trying to have a shower. When I had finished, my wife said they could hear me groaning and moaning while I had a cold shower. They all thought it was so funny. Next, I asked where we would be sleeping. They showed us a small bed in a small room with what looked like old sheets for curtains, but I was so happy to see a window with an air conditioner unit on it. And as I looked at the Christmas decorations hanging from the light, even though it was June, I thought, I can handle this. Until I turned on the aircon. It sounds like an old diesel truck had just started up. By this time, I was just laughing. My wife was fine with it, as this is what she was used to. I nervously went back into the main living area, wondering what we were going to eat. My wife was talking 100 miles per hour in their language, Tagalog, so I just sat there playing on my phone. At least the Wi-Fi was okay. Eventually, her uncle came home with some bags of food. I thought, oh no, what's that smell? There was some sort of pork dish cooked in vinegar, some that looked like cooked fertilized eggs, and barbecue chicken. Honestly, the barbecue chicken was the best I've ever tasted until I poured what I thought was gravy on it, which turned out to be cooked chicken blood or something. Her uncle's English wasn't the best, but we tried to communicate over a few San Miguel beers. He then was excited to show me his gun. It was a large silver-plated revolver, and he asked me if I wanted to go shooting, but I declined. We ended up going to bed and trying to sleep with the air conditioner, which I'm sure was running on diesel fuel. We woke in the morning to roosters crowing, dogs barking, and motorbikes flying past. I nervously used the toilet and tried to brush my teeth. I had just coffee, the others were cooking some fried meat and rice, but I declined to have any. The uncle took me into the backyard as he wanted to show me his fighting rooster. It was a lovely looking bird. You wouldn't believe how savage they can be. He showed me his dogs, but I wasn't allowed to stroke them in case they bit me. Next, it was time for my wife and everyone else, including me, to get in the car and drive to the land which my wife was selling, and then to the solicitors. I said, "Is that the car we are going in?" They said, "Yes." I said, "How many of us?" They said, 7. I said, "Air conditioned?" They said, "No." So there was no way I was going to go in an old car with no aircon for about 4 hours. I knew there was a new shopping centre that had opened not far from their house, maybe a 30-minute walk away. So I said, I don't really want to go, and I would make my own way to the new shopping centre. The uncle said, "No, you can't go out on your own." I said, "Why?" The rest of the cousins said it was dangerous and I might get kidnapped and held for ransom. So I said, "Oh, you're probably right. In that case, I will stay here." Shortly afterwards, they left. I then went outside, saw some kid on a scooter and offered him 100 pesos to take me on the back of his bike to the shopping centre. It was nice. The shopping centre was air conditioned. I walked around for half an hour. I didn't see other Western people, just me, but I felt safe. I walked past this bakery and there were rows of chairs where people sat there like in a queue. I asked someone what they were queuing for. They answered cheesecake. I ended up going to a small store, getting 4 San Miguel beers and sitting in the food hall while eating some spring rolls and secretly drinking my beer. I decided to try and find my way back to the house, but got totally lost. I then bumped into some dodgy looking guys playing cards. They asked me where I was going. I said I was trying to find the house I was staying in. They said, "You are going the wrong way." I thought, "Oh, here we go." They then said, "You need to turn right, then first left or something." I said, "You don't know where I'm staying." They said, "Yes, we do. You're staying with Chris and his family. He told us you might be out walking somewhere." I felt relieved. I thought they were going to mug me or something. I made it home just before everyone got back, and I think they all knew I had escaped. We stayed one more night, and then the uncle drove us back to Manila. To sum it up, it was an eye-opener how friendly everyone I met was, and how the girls in this area were so clean and smelt nice, even though they only had a bucket. It's not the most impoverished place in Manila, but they are so happy. That's what gets me. Also, they live on Filipino time. If you are to meet a Filipino at 2 p.m, then they will turn up an hour or so later. That's pretty much the same in Thailand as far as the timekeeping goes. If you arrange to meet somebody, probably better to turn up at least half an hour later than the arranged time, because they certainly will. It's an eye-opener. You know, sometimes when you come to a big city like Manila or Bangkok, you want to integrate with the locals. You might meet a girl and decide to go to her village in Isan or wherever in the Philippines like this guy. And when you get there, is an eye-opener, because a lot of the time they definitely don't have hot water. Sometimes the toilet is just a hole in the ground, and it's very, very rudimentary. They cook on wood or charcoal, and some of the things that they might cook, like for instance in Isan, they cook field rats. That's very, very normal, which would be very disgusting for a Western person to eat rats. It's just a different culture, and if you want to integrate into the real Thai, Filipino, Southeast Asian culture, then you have to expect to see things you wouldn't normally see in your own country. Okay, let's jump into story number 2. Hi, Peter. I sent a couple of stories in before, one of which got into your first book, but now that you have expanded to Vietnam and the Philippines, even Colombia, I thought I might cover a bit more of the early days. My first visit to Bangkok was in 1980, and of course there have been changes, mainly in transport. I saw the MRT supports going up. There was no rapid transport back then, just taxis, tuk-tuks or buses. No 7-Elevens or big shopping malls. I'd better explain that I had mainly planned to visit Burma as I'd been writing to a pen pal and had been fascinated by the place, especially the old capital, Pagan, which was just what a temple buff liked. Bangkok was just a short stopover to do the usual sights like the Grand Palace, Wat Po, and so on. All new to me. I also included a visit to a pen friend in another temple buff's dream destination, Java and Bali. Like all Indonesian Muslims, she wanted to go to Bali, just the two of us, but she giggled and said, "You must not do anything." I assured her that I didn't push my luck until I saw a green light. So during our time in Bali, it was all very proper and we didn't even eat breakfast together. But on my first real tour abroad, I experienced something very common back in the 1980s. Not now, but a Western man appearing in Asia would be mobbed by Asian college girls, all eager for experience. The first day in Bali, where Suki wandered off on her own thing, I was entertaining half a dozen wide-eyed Indonesian Chinese girls with spicy noodles, and they were egging each other on to get the first kiss. Well, it doesn't go further than saying what it was like back then and nothing developed. Even with one little cracker who cut her holiday short to travel with me to East Java temples. We had separate rooms at the hotel because I wasn't sure about commitment in view of her bad attitude. A day or so before I flew out, she raged at me for using her Indonesian name rather than her Chinese name. On the return to Bangkok, I stayed in a small hotel in Sampang while I was getting my Burma visa, and it was all different. Even without the key with the wooden tag you could leave on the table so the waitress would know which room to come to. The girl who came to collect the tray after I'd had a meal in my room offered more than waitress service, and another time a middle-aged woman but still a real beauty came offering massage, and so good was the additional service that I tipped quite generously. So when I returned after a tour around the old city walls and Golden Mount, where I avoided the guide by pretending to be Finnish with no word of English, the massage lady turned up with a girl the age of her daughter, offering double the fun. It became a bit of a fad of mine, two at once after that. Now, Burma then was a socialist republic, and under the same military dictatorship that it has at the moment, and I'm sure under Chinese control, because it went capitalist and Western friendly just when that happened in China under Deng. But that was when I was married to my Burma girl, and we were visiting during the winter and enjoying the advances in infrastructure, and never mind the inflation where you paid a restaurant bill in million kyat notes. Back in the 1980s, the Burma visa restrictions were tight. Just a few days, and I planned to make it work by 2 visits separated by a few days in Bangkok to get another visa. While battling through arrivals, I was talking to a couple of backpackers in the Western national dress of grubby t-shirts and grubby grey knee shorts with buckles hanging down. They laughed at my white speciality made safari suit with bone pocket buttons and my tie in a Scottish tartan from Heathrow duty free as being so unsuitable for the climate, though I had an idea that looking smart made customs more agreeable. It didn't noticeably. When I got through into the arrivals hall, I was stunned to see a row of gorgeous girls in colourful Burmese dress all waiting to greet me. My contact had brought her friends along. They all came to the backpacker hostel as they avoided the state-run hotels where we occupied a table, and I noted my 2 backpackers at a nearby table watching me entertain these stunners with gratifying envy. So after visiting for a short while, they ferried me down river on a 1910 built river steamer to their hometown, where I was entertained in the home of the best English speaker and probably the best looking of the lot. No funny stuff though, we had clicked at once. I could write a bit about the quite interesting town and the people I met who were either fascinated by an English guy and told me tales of British and Japanese occupation, and damned if they could decide which was worse or were sullen and suspicious government agents. And then it was back to Bangkok on a Burma Airways jet, a tiny antique aircraft where the cockpit door fell open. The pilot wore a local dress and had his feet up on the dash. The stewardess served a sandwich in a brown paper tied up with string, and the seat back collapsed. Still, it got me to Dong Muang without crashing. I stayed at a different hotel where the clearly gay room boy offered to send a girl along or a boy if I preferred. But while my head was still full of my Burmese beauty, I couldn't stand the pressure and cut through the alley past the barber shop that was in my second story to my first soapy massage, which is gone now like most of those big soapies. I had never known anything like it and miss it greatly. Of course, I later on visited Pat Pong, and while at a go-go bar upstairs was good with dancers that had forgotten to put their bikinis on, as distinct from the rip-off upstairs ping-pong venues, I was often at a more conventional bar at the other end of Street 1 and made a pig of myself with 3 girls so as not to offend any of them. I did have a look at Nana Plaza, but for some reason I still thought Pat Pong better. Inexperience on my part, maybe. So on the next trip to Burma, in another terrifying antique Russian jet, my Burma beauty just met me on her own, and over Mohinga, she set out the plan to take me to Pagan, where we could stay in a private hotel. If you want to sleep together with me, she said, as calmly as if she was suggesting a trip to the Central Market to buy a pair of trousers. The trip, though, the night was murder. I sat on an unturned bucket in a pickup truck. As I mentioned before, Pagan village was occupied with hostels and eateries then, and we had separate cabins, but she just popped along after everyone was snoring. And Pagan was unspoiled and not a tourist in sight back then, and you could walk in anywhere and take all the photos you liked. Nowadays, it is pay through the nose for not being allowed to do anything. So they tell me, oh, and a couple of things about Burma. Back then, at least, Burmese organic pipe tobacco, native coffee the best I've ever had, and had a range of banana varieties not found anywhere else. I took a turbo flight back to Rangoon, and damn the expense, Madame protesting the cost. First red flags. She was very careful with money. After that, it was back to get my flight home and the barbershop business of my second story. But already I was staying in at night, as I was already feeling committed to the one I'd marry pretty soon. Not too much of a story, but how different it was back then. The girls were not so hard as later, but they hadn't got the technique the later bargirls had developed. Why, half of them didn't even know what kissing was. I was back in Bangkok in 1982, and there was less of a story as it was my first submitted tale. I had to turn down a Thai girl because I'd already got committed to the Burmese one. Never mind the manicurist girlfriend of the brother of the shop girl I was staying with. She came to pay me a secret visit. God, I must have been lovely back then. But I had to put her off because she was supposed to be the brother's girl and I was getting committed. But there were a couple of stories. Apart from the Falklands business, a room boy asked me about it. I said we'd send a strong protest and do nothing more. No, he said, you will fight for them. He was right too. There was getting my long Thai visa cancelled when I arrived, so I left the Thai family I'd been staying with and took a visa run by rail to Penang, where of course the hotel offered me a lady. Malay, Chinese, but I was being a good boy. A Kiwi girl with a face like a block of concrete, a mouth like a spring-loaded letterbox, and a ranting monologue about the evil exploitation of vulnerable Thai girls by Western predators who took advantage. You think this is new? It was a thing back from the 1970s. So when we arrived at Bangkok railway station, I took her to where the buses were going from, and she yelled at a bunch of young Thais, "Bus 25," in a screeching voice, while tracing out 25 in the air. The young Thais stared at her dumbly, but I'd learnt a few Thai words, mainly so I could use the buses. So I asked for the number 25 bus. You know that she exploded. A nice moment, and the Thais could speak a bit of English too. After we'd had a chat, one of the girls with a pretty round face and a big smile wanted to practice her English. I wobbled a bit, then agreed. It doesn't do to refuse. It's not polite. So I really like these old stories going back to the 70s and 80s because it brings a lot of memories back for me as well. Because I first came to Thailand in the early 90s, and even back then, 30 years ago, I can remember things that were so different. I won't go on a rant about all the things I can remember, but it was very, very much different. And like the guy says in the story, you know, Thai people, they weren't so used to seeing foreigners, and you were paid a lot of attention. You know, now it's all over the internet. Millions and millions of visitors come to Thailand each year. Nobody will give you a second glance. But back then, you know, you were a foreign guy here in, especially out of the cities like Bangkok, when you went to a kind of a rural area, you were looked upon like fascination. You know, people just wanted to touch you to see if you were real. Very, very nice story there. Right, okay, we've got two more stories. Let's jump into our third of four stories today. Life can be so unfair for so many people, and at some point for all of us, but what she had to go through was far too much. I'm talking about Fang, a petite, slim, warm-hearted lady with the most beautiful smile I've ever seen. Without going too deep into the background, she survived a Western husband who beat her almost to death while she was pregnant, all because he couldn't perform due to his excessive drinking. I know him, and I know he can't even go back to his own country because the police would arrest him for a previous abusive case. He mentally and physically destroyed her, a sweet and gentle woman attacked and strangled by a man nearly twice her size. Despite everything, she still lights up every room she walks into with her smile and joyful spirit. It amazes me how someone who has suffered so much can carry so much warmth and positivity. I remember how she used to bring food to a Western man who had lost everything and was sleeping on a bench every night with nowhere to go. I once told her, "You don't even know how you'll pay for your own food tomorrow." And she simply said, he didn't know if he would eat tonight. That's the kind of woman she is. After giving birth, the abuse didn't stop. She ended up in the hospital several times, and once she even rode her motorbike there herself, holding her newborn baby because he refused to help. She fainted on the way and thought she was going to die, but she kept going because of her daughter. You might wonder why she stayed with him. It was during the corona period. There was no escape, no place to go, no safety net. Before that, she was a successful car broker. She would find cars for sale online, contact the owners and offer to help sell them. If she got more than what the owner asked for, she kept the difference. In her 20s, she also did some modelling. Her smile is unforgettable. And she was, as you say, Peter, a stunner. I had to look the word up, and yes, it describes her perfectly, even in her late 30s. When we go dancing, all eyes are on her, then all eyes are on me, mostly from guys wondering how I ended up with someone like her. So, how did we meet? I used to go to a pool every weekend. One day, I noticed her swimming alone. She had a perfect figure, that bright smile, long dark hair. I wasn't sure if she was with someone, so I circled round a few times until I realised she was by herself. At one point, she was swimming backwards and bumped her head at the end of the pool, then started laughing. She looked at me and said, you not see, while laughing and rubbing her head. Her English was minimal at the time, but it had improved a lot since. When she got out of the pool, I decided to ask her for Telegram, but just then her friend arrived. That made it trickier, but I still walked over and asked. She hesitated, but her friend encouraged her, and she gave it to me. I waited 2 days, then messaged her and invited her out. She said yes. We went dancing. We both loved it. She had a great time, but nothing happened. I tried to kiss her once or twice, but she wouldn't let me. At the end of the night, I offered to walk her home. She agreed, but made it clear that she would sleep in her home and I would sleep in mine. I said, of course. It was late, dark, and I suggested taking a tuk-tuk. She said she preferred to walk since her place wasn't far. As we walked through a dark street, I began to feel uneasy. I gently held her arm when I heard the sound of a motorbike approaching. First fast, then slower, then crawling. I looked back and realised they were coming for us. She was on my right and I pulled her to my left, but not quickly enough. The passenger on the back of the motorbike snatched her bag and they disappeared into the night. She froze in shock. I felt useless. We walked to a better lit area, found 2 security guards and tried to call the police. No one came. They told us to go to the station. She kept saying I should go home, but I wasn't not going anywhere. We got to the station. It was closed. She had no phone, no house keys, no money. Still, she kept telling me not to worry about her. I told her to come home with me, sleep at my place, and we would sort everything out in the morning. She hesitated. She didn't want to. She tried to remember a friend's phone number, but no luck. These days, everything is stored in our phones. It was nearly 4 in the morning. I asked her to trust me. I had 2 rooms. There was security in the building. She could tell them she was with me. I did my best to reassure her. Finally, in her shocked state, she agreed. When we arrived, I showed her the spare room, but she collapsed in mine, hugged me and cried until she fell asleep. Nothing happened that night. The next day, I helped her call someone to open her home. That's when we became one. She often told me she was surprised I stayed and helped. It made me wonder what kind of men she had known before. Honestly, I think most men would have done the same. She started cooking for me every day. When we went out, we always picked simple, quiet places. For 6 months, she studied to become a hairdresser so she could support herself and her daughter. She never asked me for money. When I tried to give her some, she refused. From the start, I told her I wasn't rich and my job assignment was short term. She said she didn't care. She only wanted love and a family. After her course, we opened a tiny salon together with some of her savings and a little help from me. We brought a second-hand equipment and rented a small space in a quiet neighborhood. She used to pay $200 for her apartment. Now she pays $250 for the salon, which also doubles as her home. If things go well, it might break even in a few months, but now it's rainy season and customers are few. That's why I support her with $150 a month. But school fees, food, electricity and daily costs quickly add up. She knows my last paycheck is coming soon. Still, she stays hopeful. She says being together gives her strength. She believes with hard work she can manage it all. She works from early morning to late at night without complaint. A few weeks ago, I spent a night in the hospital. She stayed with me the entire time and then went to work with no sleep. But my visa is ending and I cannot stay. I will leave the country very soon. I will do everything I can to find another job and return. She deserves a good life. She deserves someone who loves her. I just can't provide that right now. I know $150 makes all the difference for her and her daughter. I'll do what I can. I've never loved or been loved like this before. That's life. This is a story of a woman who just wants to be loved. And the truth is, it is very easy to love her. Another nice story. There is a lot of nice women out there. A lot of guys say to me here in Thailand when they come here to visit, they say, oh, it's so hard to find a nice girl. You know, if you don't go off with bargirls, your chances of finding somebody nice are very, very difficult. And it is. It's not easy actually doing the actual search. But there are a lot of nice girls here, like this girl. And if you search long enough, if you're looking for somebody to have a meaningful long-term relationship, don't give up on it. There is a lot of nice girls out there. There's a lot of girls out there who want to scam you and get money from you. But there's also a lot of nice girls. You've just got to find them out, as it were. Okay, we're going to jump into our fourth and final story this morning. This is a shorter story. I hope you enjoy this. My name is Mark, and I want to tell you how one simple massage in Pattaya changed the course of my entire life. I was in my early 50s and had just come out of a long and lifeless marriage that had dragged on for 30 years. My wife barely spoke to me anymore, and any warmth or affection between us had long disappeared. No kisses, no hugs, and certainly no aerobics. We hardly did anything together anymore, apart from the occasional massage at the same place at the same time, though never in the same room. That was about as close as we got. I worked long hours as an electrician and was often away from home for weeks at a time. The distance between us grew to the point where we were just strangers living under the same roof. Then one evening, she suggested we try a new massage shop. She had her regular girl and I ended up with someone new. I laid on the table face down waiting. A few moments later, I felt a soft hand on my back and a gentle voice say, "Hello, how are you?" Her English was broken but sweet. That massage was the most peaceful hour I'd had in years. She had this calming energy, and by the time it was over, I felt like a different person. I was so impressed that I asked the manager for her name, and she wrote Ning on the back of a business card. I still have that card in my wallet to this day. From that point on, I went to see Ning every couple of weeks. Sometimes I'd try my luck and touch her leg, but she would just smile politely and move away. I realized quickly that she was not that kind of girl, and strangely, I respected that. I started looking forward to seeing her and being around her calm presence. Then, in October, my world fell apart. I found out my wife had been cheating on me with someone I had considered a friend. He stopped talking to me out of nowhere, and it all made sense when her friend accidentally let it slip that my wife had been seeing him. I was furious and heartbroken. Ning noticed and seemed different and asked what was wrong. I told her and she just looked at me and said, "I'm sorry for you," in a soft voice. That small act of kindness meant more than anything at that moment. Eventually, I worked up the courage to ask her out to lunch. She said she lived far away, but I told her I was a driver by trade and it was no problem. So I drove 40 miles, picked her up. We went to a little Chinese restaurant she liked, and although we could hardly understand each other without the help of Google Translate, we laughed through it and somehow made it work. I had not been on a date in over 3 decades, and it felt like I was learning everything again. When I went to pay the bill, she had already beaten me to it. That caught me off guard. From that day, I knew she was different. Over the next few months, we spent more time together. We went for walks in the parks, visited beaches, and even checked out a few museums. Taking photos together helped us communicate when words were too hard. Slowly, I learned about her life. She had a son back home in her village and was working in Pattaya to send money home. Her life was not easy, but she never complained. Her smile never faded. By March, I knew I loved her. I told her I had already filed for divorce and she cried. She said she did not want to be the reason. I told her whether we stayed together or not, I had to move on. My marriage was long dead after my divorce was finalized. We got married in 2014. She never asked me for anything, not once. I helped her apply for a visa and we started the long process. In 2019, we traveled to Guangzhou for her green card interview. I waited outside the American consulate for 2 hours, the only foreigner in the area. When she came out, she was beaming. She handed me a red envelope. Inside was $8,000. She said she had saved most of the money I had sent her during our year apart and wanted to use it to buy a house. I could not believe it. I had never met anyone so thoughtful. We found a small townhouse in LA near her family and put half the money down. Of course, $8,000 was a drop in the ocean. I had to make up the rest. But it was a nice thought that counted. We are almost done paying it off. She works hard and still manages to deposit money every month to help. She cooks fresh meals every day. I used to live on microwave dinners and takeaway. Now I eat dumplings, fish, vegetables and real Chinese food. I used to eat at Panda Express, but after tasting her cooking, that fast food stuff is ruined for me. She even tells me off when I start gaining weight, calling me fat in the most honest yet loving way. I know it is her way of caring. We have our arguments like any couple, but we always laugh in the end. She is traditional and kind of proud. Once when I waited in the car during a job interview, she came out furious. Apparently they offered her more money for something inappropriate and she stormed out. That was when I truly saw how serious she was about doing things properly. We have built a quiet life together, nothing fancy but honest and real. She is the most generous, selfless woman I've ever met. Her name is Shirong, which means precious one, and she truly is that. I may have lost everything in my divorce, but what I have gained was far more valuable. A second chance, real love, a partner who gives without asking and cares without conditions. She is my everything, and thank fate every day that I met on that massage table all those years ago. So that's really nice. Another successful story there. And, you know, sometimes people write into me and say, oh, can't you read out some nice stories? All the stories you read out are crash and burn. But at the end of the day, guys, I can only read out what you send in. And if you send me in nothing but crash and burn stories, that's all I'm able to read out. If you send in stories like this, I can read these out. So as always, I'll end as I always do. If you're sitting on a story, you've been to Thailand or anywhere else for that matter, you've got a nice relationship story, it went wrong or it went well, it doesn't matter. It's always interesting to hear a great story, and I'd be delighted to read it out right here on Thailand Bound. I'll change the names, I'll make it anonymous, and you too can listen to your own story. Okay, that's it for another week. 4 brand new stories, never read out before. Hopefully we'll have another bunch of stories that haven't been read out before for next Saturday. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch up with you real soon.